Now sitting as the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. I am joined by my colleagues, Council Vice President Friedson and Council Member Katz. We have one item on our agenda today. That's Expedited Bill 25-23, Taxation Development Impact Taxes for Transportation and Public School Improvement Amendments. Oh, I guess there's a resolution that goes along with it, but it is one item. This was a bill, expedited bill, put forward by Council President Friedson, Council Vice President Friedson, Council President Glass, myself, and co-sponsored by Councilmember Natalie Fanny Gonzalez. I'm going to turn this over to Ms. McCartney Green to walk it through with us, and I know we have a number of other people who can weigh in.
Good morning, Chair Stewart and Councilmember Friedson. Today with me, I have at my table is to my right, Jason Santori with the Planning Board, and also my colleague, Dr. Lynn Orland, along with our finance team that has been very, very helpful through this process. Bill, Dennis, Todd, and Mary Beck, manager of OMB. As you mentioned, Expedited Bill 2523, Taxation Development Impact Tax for Transportation and Public School Improvements, had a public hearing on June 13th at 1:30. There were two speakers that were present. Their testimonies are provided. One of them was from the Planning Board that gave support, but also had amendments as well. So the Planning Department supported modifying the language for transportation impact taxes, along with some minor modification to Section 5255, but also had amendments or also did not support a carryover amount for the school impact tax, and we'll get to that conversation later. We also had the second testimony by Laura Stewart, who on behalf of the Montgomery County PTA also had support with amendments for a cap that's different than what's provided as introduced in the bill. And then we also had testimony from the Maryland Building Industry Association that's also provided in your packet. With that being said, the development impact tax is a revenue that the county collects. The transportation tax supports for local transportation and for schools, for school projects. The purpose of the bill is to do three things. The first part is to modify the calculations for tax rate adjustments for transportation. The Department of Finance is required by May 1st biannually to post the rate adjustments in the county register. Looking at the rate adjustments for this upcoming year, notice that they were significantly high. With that, you notice there was a flaw in the calculation for the transportation tax rates. So the recommendation here is that instead of requiring an annual average every 2 years, by requiring a cumulative increase or decrease in the construction costs rather than an annual average every 2 years. The second part of the bill also puts a cap on the development impact tax rate for school and transportation tax. Specifically, it puts on a 20% cap. And third, this bill allows the opportunity for a carryover provision to recapture that taxes in future years. I'm going to stop there so I can turn it over to Dr. Orland, who can walk you through the package, specifically through the specific amendments. And page 5 starts with decision point number 1.
Page 3, I think, actually. Yeah, thank you. Good morning. The first item on page 3 is the issue about the transportation impact tax biennial update. This is a process that was instituted, I'm not sure, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, where the thought was rather than having the council come back regularly to update the tax by due to inflation, that there ought to be a process where it happens more or less automatically. And so the thought at the time, in fact the law was changed at the time, to make it so for the transportation impact tax, the intent was that every 2 years there would be an update based on the cumulative impact of inflation, and it was based on the Baltimore-Washington region construction cost index. Unfortunately, and this is something we didn't catch until this go-around, we looked at the way the law was written, and finance dutifully followed with the way the law was written. It says to look at the prior 2 years, look at the increase in each of those 2 years and take the average of the two. Well, as you can see, that doesn't raise the impact tax rate according to inflation, increases it by half of what the inflation is. And so the idea here is to correct that and go back and change the law so that it does look cumulatively over the last 2 years. It does not try to recoup the lost revenue, if you will, the foregone revenue for the mistake over the prior 8 or 10 years, but it does try going forward to correct the same amount. So, for example, in calendar year 2021, the construction cost index increased by about 6%. In 2022, it actually went up by about over 12%, about 12.5%. And so the average of the two was 9.47, which is what finance calculated in the rates that they published in the register on May 1st and would go into effect on July 1st without any change, without changes that might happen here. But the cumulative increase is actually 19.74%. So we're recommending that that bill be, on this first decision point, that you recommend approval of that, and which would result in a impact tax increase for transportation of 19.74%. I should say, before going further, the estimates we had so far for the fiscal impact of this bill, both the increased revenue from the transportation tax and the reduced revenue from the school impact tax, was taken into account when the council approved the amended CIP last month. It was built into the numbers, and so only if you were to approve at least based on what we know so far, only if you approve a cap, which we'll get to later, which is less than 20%, or if you don't approve a cap at all, would the CIP more or less be at least somewhat out of balance with revenues. But again, this first decision point is whether you concur with the idea of having this be a cumulative increase for the transportation biennial update or not.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think the committee does.
Okay. That's decision point number one. Number two is, and this was actually a recommendation from the planning board. It's a good one. If there are other types of charges which spin off of whatever the impact tax rate is, and so the school utilization payments that are enlisted in the growth and infrastructure policy is a factor based on whatever the school impact tax rates are. And so the resolution that that has been introduced should include, their recommendation, it also should include a new rate table for the utilization rates. And we think that's a good idea, and so we're asking for your approval of that.
Yep.
Whatever the increase is, you haven't got that point yet, whatever whether it's 20%, 25%, something else, but whatever that is, to include the utilization rate.
Yes, we agree. Great suggestion. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to pick up from here?
Yeah, I just wanted to, the impact statements that were provided today was from the Office of Legislative Oversight, and that's the Racial Equity and Social Justice Impact Statement. It did have a negative impact just on who was going to benefit from the cap, and in short time, it would generally benefit developers who are disproportionately white and decrease tax payments while likely diminishing the quality of schools. There also is an impact statement, economic impact statement, that was also provided that said the overall positive impact on economic conditions in the county, because it would reduce operating expenses for commercial and residential developers. And then OMB, I know, and Finance are still working on the impact statement as well. That is pending, and received a letter of extension not until June 27th. And so Finance can still provide some projections today with the anticipation of a fiscal impact statement coming before action. I'm going to turn it back over to...
Okay. Then we get to the carryover idea. The thought here is that if there's to be a cap, that should there be a provision by which the county effectively recoups the money that is foregone by having a cap. So, as pointed out earlier in the packet, the school impact tax rates, for example, depending upon whether you're in an infill area or turnover area and the type of development, without any change, the increase would go from 41.3%, as low as that as an increase, to as much as 129.2%, and that's for multifamily high-rise and turnover areas. These numbers are much, much higher than we've ever seen before. For example, for transportation, the highest we've seen prior to this, transportation at least, was about, over a 2-year period, was about 20%. But the increase, because it was only based on half of that, was really more about 10%. For schools, we don't have a good comparison, unfortunately, because every couple of years we do seem to change how the school rates are changing. But we know from just experience, having been around this for quite a while, is that the school impact tax rates here are much, much higher under this biennial adjustment than what they've ever been. So the thought, again, is to have this carryover idea and put into the law. And the way it would work works a little differently for transportation for schools, but the idea is the same, which is that to the degree we're not collecting the natural increase that's represented by those percentages on page 2, future developments starting in 2025, when that update occurs, would pay up to whatever the cap is that you set. And that would continue until the amount that the foregone revenue is basically recaptured. And be go upfront about this, there's a real policy issue here, which is to what extent do you treat developments as individual developers, and what extent do you treat development as an entity as a whole. As an entity as a whole, you would want to have a recapture rate, because development is, the idea of the impact tax is development is supposed to pay for its fair share. Its impact, that's in the name, its impact on school construction needs and on local transportation. On the other hand, if you're talking about an individual developer or development, it would be effectively being required to pay a higher amount than what that impact of that development is, because they're basically paying the amount that should have been paid if we didn't have a cap on the earlier developments. So that's the basic consideration here, I think, generally speaking. For it really applies to the schools tax, not so much for transportation, because transportation, at least now, what you first said a few minutes ago, it's less than 20% increase anyway, unless you go with the 12 to 14% increase that the BIA is recommending. So the first issue is for decision for number 3 is whether the committee approves the recommendation to amend the carryover calculation for the transportation impact tax, which is specified there on bottom page 5. Again, it won't have any effect now, because if your cap is 20% or higher, because the increase is not as high as 20%. But we would recommend actually doing this.
Glenn, I just wanted to clarify that the amendment is also removing, as introduced, the word percentage and replacing that with dollar amount. And that was a big significant change, because when we looked at the calculations, and Finance pointed out that we would be over exceeding that accumulation if we use the word percentage. And so the amendment takes that into consideration, and also takes into consideration that the tax rate before calculating the next biannual adjustment.
I think, too, if I could just say, Glenn, I think that the approach we've taken all along really deals with sort of the corporate development theory or position, and I think the carryover is consistent with that from the standpoint of we're not looking at each individual development and saying this particular middle school. We've got blended rates already that are sort of blending at the different levels of school children and those costs. And the timing is not precise either right now. We're using old cost information for future development already. So I think that it's not too far afield to go with this notion.
Okay, so this is, just to clarify, decision point 3, the first one was on the transportation recommendation to amend the carryover calculation. And you have agreement on that? All right. Decision point 3, you have agreement on. And so now we'll look at the school piece of this.
Okay, the next one is the school carryover, and there's actually 2 sets of changes here. One is the same kind of changes that Ludine just mentioned that was applied to transportation, but on the other is a further clarification, correction that Finance pointed out to us yesterday after the packet came out, which is in a one-page email that Ms. McCartney Green sent you yesterday, which basically would do the carryover addition after the percentage increases. I'm sorry, after the, let me back up. The way schools calculation is done biannually is you look at the average cost of school construction and make it sensitive to the type of development we're talking about, whether it's single-family, detached, multifamily, or low-rise or high-rise, and whether it's infill or turnover. And the idea is you figure out what that rate is and then add to it the amount that you're recapturing, so that the percentage increase doesn't go higher than the cap. And so those two amendments are what we're putting forward, what you see on the middle of page 6, but as modified by the handout we gave you earlier.
Mrs. Story, did you want to speak to this?
Sure. So I want to say that the correct changing to say after instead of before calculating is a correct change if you are going to go ahead and continue with the carryover. And if I could just explain why the planning board and planning department did not support the carryover with respect to schools, is because we felt that the role of the carryover should be to get us back to our true rate. So the whole point of this effort here is to say, when we have periods of high inflation, whether we're applying an inflation factor on the transportation side or on the school side, we see the school construction costs increasing dramatically. We want to be able to kind of soften the blow of that. And so let's ease us up to where it's supposed to be. And the 20% cap, or whatever cap you set, will get us there. The problem with on the school side is that we recalculate that true rate every single time. So we say, what are the students that are being generated? What are the current school construction costs? They're not lagging costs. They're actually the current costs that come right out of the CIP. We get them from MCPS. For example, they look and they say, we've got 3 high school projects in the CIP. Here's how much they cost. Here's how big we're building them to. Here's what the cost is per student. So we take those data and we put those in. We calculate a true rate. And so when we calculate that true rate, if we've got money banked, an increase banked, we're going to be adding that on. And the problem is, right now, we saw some really large increases. We're talking 130% in one case. So we're going to be banking a lot. And then we'll come through in the next time, 2 years from now, we're going to calculate a number that's also going to be very high. So that's going to be clipped at the 20%, but we're probably going to add into what we already have banked. If we've banked, let's say, $5,000, now we're going to add another $4,000. So now we'll have $9,000 banked. We're still nowhere near the true rate. 2 years after that, we're going to calculate it again really high, which will be well beyond the 20%. We're going to bank another $3,000 or $4,000, right? And we're going to just keep banking. And then at a certain point, though, it will get to the true rate, and we're going to start dipping into that bank, and we're going to have thousands and thousands of dollars in the bank that won't make sense. We've already calculated the true rate. We're at the true rate. That's what it should be.
I guess and again, the alternative point of view on this is this. First of all, we don't know what's going to happen 2 years from now or 4 years from now. It's very plausible that, in fact, construction costs will go down because they're so high now they could come down, in which case adding from the bank might get us to 20%, or might not even get us to 20%. For the one example of the, I agree with you about the turnover areas for the multifamily high-rise, that's 129%. I mean, even if we went with 0 increase in construction costs between now and 2 years from now, it would take us 12 years or 14 years to actually get rid of that backlog. The others not nearly as many years, but nevertheless, it's there. Again, but the question really is, and Jason said at the beginning, if the goal is to set the rate at its natural rate, then you wouldn't have a carryover. But the idea is that you want to recoup the money effectively that's foregone because you provided this effectively a break for the developers in the next 2 years. Then you would have a carryover, and then it would continue until that bank is extinguished. So that's the policy issue.
Yeah, I think just one thing to point out, the infill high-rise rates, the rate of increase is so high is because the rates are so low. So that's one of the problems sometimes when we talk in terms of percentages.
Yeah, the other issue that I want to take us back for a minute because I think this is important for historical context. And first of all, thank you, Mr. Sartori in particular, who's really helped us to get better data at planning, which has helped this entire process, which regardless of how one thinks about these particular issues, having the right data with which to work from is very important. And so I really appreciate the role that planning has played, and you in particular have played, to try to get us to that place. A lot has been made about the changes that we made on the impact taxes previously, but one of the major changes that we made actually led us to this moment. And one was that we lowered the prior rate from 120% of a student, which exceeded the impact, which, there were questions of whether or not it was appropriate for us to overcharge for what we thought the impact was. And we lowered that to 100%, the full amount, but not more than the full amount of what we expected the cost of the students being generated. And then we also made a commitment to have more specific disaggregated data for the type of housing and the type of student generation that there would be. And we made a commitment to do a better job of collecting that data. And the combination of all of those things, in addition to dramatic changes in the marketplace, which more families are living in, homes other than turnover homes, single family turnover homes and townhomes, which historically have had the highest expected student generation because of the housing crisis, because of COVID issues, because of all kinds of other things. That has led to these, dramatic changes, not to mention inflationary pressures, labor shortages that have skyrocketed construction costs. So I just think that historical context is important. I think some of this conversation has been lost, and some of the prior decisions that we've been made at times have been somewhat mischaracterized. And so I just think it's important to note that. Having said all that, I think it's important for this conversation because the 20% carryover, first of all, is more akin to what we used to do. It gave that 20% cushion. I wasn't comfortable with that as a general practice, but if we are going to set a cap in order to prevent the shocks to the system, which could have, very unfortunate consequences, and prevent the very things we desperately are trying to incentivize and that we know we need, it will allow us to recapture some of that money down the road, which I think is appropriate and reasonable if we implement this. So, that was the general approach. I will just note, I'm not a big fan of impact taxes. I have said that before. I don't think that it is a great way to generate revenue for schools and for transportation. It is charging new residents in a disproportionate way than we charge existing residents for things that I believe existing residents benefit from as well. And I think that's important to note. Having said that, we're not eliminating and dismantling impact taxes. And so as long as we don't do that, we need to find ways to generate revenue that is fair and that is sensible and that it finds appropriate balances. And I do think that capping it to avoid these shocks to the system, but having a carryover where we can recoup the revenues in order to move forward to the extent that we can, as long as we have impact taxes, that seems like a reasonable approach to me. So I appreciate planning's recommendation. I'll just put forward, I think in order for us to bring everybody together and get to a point where I think we can support a proposal here, I personally think that the adjustments to refine the language, but the general approach that was proposed in the underlying proposal is an appropriate way to move forward.
Great. Councilmember Katz?
Thank you. I actually agree with the Vice President on this. And I just always would like to mention that we talk about the impact regarding school costs, but this is not school costs. This is the cost to build the school. The operating cost, in many cases, is much more. It's like the car you buy. To run the car costs you a whole lot more than the cost of the car. And so I agree that this is a way to recoup, and I don't disagree that an impact tax does have, the people who are living here in many cases are gaining by from the impact tax. However, the reason that there's a need for additional housing and whatnot is because of the people living here who have generated such fine areas. So I'm fine with this. I believe this does take care of it, and I'm sure we'll have to revisit this once we once we get down that, literally down that road, but I'm fine with it. Thank you, Madam President.
And I'll say, I actually also agree with Council Vice President on this point, and I don't need to belabor this point, but I think we can move forward with keeping in the recapture as was in the draft bill, but make the change that was suggested by Council staff. And it also, Mr. Sartori, I do appreciate your thoughts on this, and I'm sure we will be coming back to this in a bigger conversation on this.
Madam Chair, if I could just note, I always appreciate when my colleagues have the courage and conviction to actually agree with me.
I'd like to change my thoughts.
Great. So now we have a clarifying amendment.
Yeah, and this was recommended by the planning board staff, and so just to better capture the school impact tax calculation, there's an amendment to lines 27 to 23, and basically inserting the average Montgomery County school construction costs, and that's just a clarifying amendment there, and that's on page 6 of the staff report.
I think we're all good with that? Yep.
And I'll cover decision point number 6, which doesn't exist. We obviously don't know how to count, so we'll go to the next item since there's a phantom decision point number 6. The next issue is Councilor Juano's proposal. He has basically 2 parts. One is that if we're going to have a cap, his recommendation would be 25% rather than 20%, and it's explained in the memo that he sent out to the council members, just in the packet. He's also, however, recommending that there not be a recapture provision now. I know you've already voted on it, but to say not to vote on, not to have a recapture right now, to really look at this concept more, or other concepts, prior to the next biennial update in 2 years. And he points out that the growth and infrastructure policy, the next version of it, is going to be sent over by the planning board no later than August 1st next year. And as day follows night, they'll be sending over a bill to revise the impact tax, because they almost always do, not automatically, but it seems that way, which is fine. And so if that happens, it likely will happen. Both will be transmitted to the council by beginning of August next year. Both will go to public hearing together. At that point, it'll bifurcate. The growth and infrastructure policy will go to the PHP committee. The impact tax bill will go to the GO committee, and they'll each do their thing, and they'll come back together again at the council, and you'll have work sessions on both. And by law, the council has to adopt a growth and infrastructure policy by November 15th of 2024, which is actually November 12th. That's the last Tuesday before then. And you likely would approve an impact tax bill at the same time. It may not be in effect right away. It may not be expedited. Maybe you could set the time whenever you want to, but it likely will be in effect prior to the July 1st, 2025 update. So that's what he's recommending. He's recommending, in terms of the bill itself, bottom line, he's recommending approving the resolution, but with a 25% increase rather than 20%. He's recommending that part of the bill where the transportation impact tax calculation is corrected. That was decision point number 1. But he's not recommending including the recapture provisions. So decision point number 7 is, first of all, should the cap be set at 20% or 25%, as he's recommending, or the Building Industry Association would recommend a cap of between 12 to 14%. I want to point out that if it is 12 to 14%, it will be 1 or 2 decades before we catch up, almost under any scenario. And as I pointed out, if it's less than 20%, the impact in terms of the CIP would likely be negative in terms of how much revenue we have to the expenditures. So that's your point.
Yeah,
what's the cap level?
Right. We can take these one by one. The cap that is proposed in the bill right now is at 20%, and I think we are good at keeping that. And then the second point on the recapture, I think we just had a conversation on the recapture and how this committee unanimously feels about keeping the recapture in there, understanding that we are going to get an updated growth and infrastructure policy, but I think it's the position of this committee, if I'm not misspeaking for my colleagues, that it is our intent to make sure that we do recapture these funds as we're moving forward, because we are putting in a cap, and to have that clearly stated as the planning department is looking at the update in this policy. Council Vice President Friedson?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As the resident council member who serves on both of the committees of jurisdiction and went through the multitude of committee sessions over the last growth and infrastructure policy, which really dealt with a lot of issues that were very nuanced. I look forward to taking that up again. I'll note we're going to get that bill, as Dr. Orland has noted, no matter what. If there's a bill that's going to come forward from planning as part of a recommendation to make a change, whether we legislate or don't legislate, we will get a bill and we will decide whether or not we act upon the bill. So I think the committee's view of moving forward with a bill makes sense, and we'll have the opportunity with ample advanced time, more so than now, in this particular issue, to be able to make any adjustments or changes to the way that impact taxes are charged.
If I can add, sorry, we forgot to mention something. It doesn't affect a decision point, but it's a point of information. One of the other comments the planning board made is that we'll need really to have a zoning text amendment to amend the Bethesda Park Impact Payment and the Silver Spring Civic Enhancement Fund, Community Fund, which also spin off of the impact tax, but that has to be done as part of a ZTA. So if the council approves these measures on Tuesday and it's signed into law by the executive, then we'll start working on, well, not we, the dean will start working on the ZTA and have that before you either later this summer or in the fall.
Could I just ask one question too? Back on the clarifying amendment, I just want to make sure I understand the average MCPS construction cost. I think that is just how it's being done now and just writing it that way. Okay, just wanted to check.
Yeah, is the ZTA coming from recommendation from planning, or who will? Yes.
Yeah, so we've actually transmitted a recommended ZTA to be introduced, and it was based on our recommendation, so it would have to be modified if necessary based on the decisions the council makes on the transportation impact tax.
Great.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And those won't take effect this year, obviously. It'll take effect next year and future years.
Great. All right. Well, I think with that, we've gone through the packet. There is unanimous agreement to move forward and recommend this bill as amended to the full council.
The resolution.
Resolution, sorry. Right. Resolution and vote, right?
Yeah, both.
Both, right.
Both.
Yeah. Good. All right. Well, thank you all for your work on this, and we appreciate it. Have a good afternoon.